Detectives saw the nude body of a young female lying face down in this wooded area.
What did investigators think had happened to the victim?
She had been strangled. She had ligature marks around her neck.
And she had been sexually assaulted.
You come to the realization how violent and disturbing the crime was.
Everything around me just disappeared. It was terrible. I cried for I don't even know how long.
How can you comprehend that your 17-year-old sister is dead? I was just in such shock. We all suffered and still are suffering.
She was visually upset, mad that he was saying some nasty things.
She wanted to ask him what that was all about. She was a girl on a mission.
Barbara's friends dropped her off here, and they last saw her walking down the street towards her boyfriend's house.
Did anyone in your family believe that he was capable of murder?
Everybody thought he did it. Everybody did.
I said, "Hold. This is what we've been looking for."
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. The city is the proud home to the Blossom Music Center, an outdoor amphitheater where residents come together for events and concerts. But the community gathering spot became the unlikely backdrop for a terrifying mystery when the battered body of a young woman was found on its sprawling grounds. As officers descended on the crime scene, few could have imagined the complexity of the investigation ahead of them, nor how deeply the tragedy would affect everyone on the case. December 20th, 1987. It was a quiet and cold Sunday morning when a maintenance worker at the Blossom Music Center made a disturbing discovery. What did the man report to police?
He reported that as he drove down the road, he could see in a small wooded area what appeared to be a mannequin. As he got closer, he realized it was a female nude lying in the debris.
Could he tell if she was still alive?
He could not. He reached out with his foot and nudged her thigh. And at that point, he realized it was a person who was obviously deceased.
Police raced to the location.
When the detectives arrived on scene, they saw the nude body of a young female lying face down in this wooded area. It was obvious from looking at the body that she had been in some sort of a struggle.
The crime scene was quickly sealed. The initial examination of the victim made it clear the case was now a homicide investigation.
She had bruising on her arms, on the back of her hands. Her fingernails were damaged. She had a bloody lip and nose.
She had been strangled. She had some ligature marks around her neck that they could see.
The young woman had also suffered a severe blunt force injury to the back of her head. What did the condition of her bruised body and her broken fingernails tell them about the violence this victim endured?
It definitely showed she was struggling with her assailant.
The victim's state of undress left little doubt that the crime had been sexually motivated. Could detectives get any sense of how old the victim was?
They could tell she was young, a middle to older teen.
Was her clothing ever found?
No, the detectives and the patrol officers that were there on scene checked the immediate and surrounding areas. No clothing was found.
Police noted the access road that led to the area was unpaved and lightly traveled.
It was a small, almost dirt path that kind of ran behind the Blossom Music Center. Not too many people knew about O'Neill Road or have a reason to be traveling on.
Police were confident that only someone who lived nearby would be familiar with the location. But even more important was the evidence that indicated that the brutal attack had taken place somewhere else. What made them so sure?
None of it appeared to be disturbed. No other signs that whatever had occurred there. That led them to the conclusion that she had been murdered someplace else.
Police didn't find anything in the area that would identify the young woman beyond the jewelry she was wearing.
She had some dangly earrings with some multicolored stones.
One was still in her ear, the other one was in her hair where it had been ripped out.
On her finger was a high school class ring.
From Erie View Catholic High School in the area of Garfield Heights, which is about 30 miles north of Cuyahoga Falls.
Police immediately began to scour recent missing persons cases, searching for one from Garfield Heights. They hoped it would fill in critical missing details, in particular, the name of the teenager and a lead on who might have killed her. Investigators in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, were trying to identify a teenager found murdered in the rural countryside. Detectives hoped the coroner's office might be able to advance their investigation. What did the autopsy determine was the cause of her death?
Strangulation, both manually and with a ligature. The coroner could see linear abrasions as if a cord of some type had been wrapped around her neck.
How long did the coroner think she had been dead?
She was found about 10:20 in the morning. He figured she had been placed at the dump site 4 hours before that.
The coroner placed the victim's time of death somewhere between 2:30 and 6:30 on the morning she was discovered. The report also confirmed what investigators at the crime scene had already suspected.
She had been sexually assaulted.
But no biological evidence identifying the killer was recovered during the sexual assault exam. The victim's broken and bloody fingernails were also analyzed and collected from her fingernail scrapings.
Back then, DNA technology was in its infancy.
Did that mean there was no DNA evidence in this case?
None that they could find at that time.
Although the autopsy gave investigators little direction in their pursuit of a suspect, it was much more helpful in providing police with a name of the victim. The coroner made an important observation when he studied the class ring that had been on the teenager's finger.
When the coroner removed the ring, a name was engraved on the inside of that.
What was the name the coroner saw?
Barbara Blatnick.
Police quickly discovered more information that supported their theory that Barbara Blatnick was the victim. What did detectives learn when they ran Barbara Blatnick's name through the system?
17 years of age, with an address of Garfield Heights, Ohio.
Police reached out to Barbara Blatnick's family and asked them the question no parent would ever want to answer.
Garfield Heights police contacted her father, and they had him come down to the Summit County coroner's office.
John Blatnick then confirmed his worst fears. The victim was, in fact, his precious daughter, Barbara. John told police that until that moment, he had no idea she might even be in danger. He assumed she had just spent the night at a friend's house. The heartbroken father now had the grim task of sharing the news with his wife and eldest daughter. Donna was just 19 years old that tragic day. What do you remember happening when you went inside?
There was policemen and detectives in the house. All I remember was Barbie's dead, somebody killed her. It's kind of like a blur from there. How can you comprehend that your 17-year-old sister is dead? I was sitting there in the middle of a tornado. Everything's like spinning around. I just didn't know what to do or say. I was just in such shock.
Donna's pain was magnified when she watched her mother collapse to the floor in grief. Teenager. Her friends thought of her as fearless, cool, and a little rebellious. She had big feathered hair and a style that was all her own. Was there something about Barbara that you thought set her apart from other girls her age?
She was just like so outgoing. She was never intimidated by people or a situation. She was never shy. Everybody was her best friend right away.
Chris Kalusik was one of those best friends.
She was just energetic, fun to be around, and lit up the room like a Christmas tree. She just made you smile. She was the life of the party.
For Chris and the rest of the community, Barbara's murder was a crushing blow.
I heard it on the radio. Everything around me just disappeared. Just so hurt inside. I mean, it was just so sad. And it was terrible. I cried for I don't even know how long. I couldn't move.
Chris also couldn't imagine who could have done something so savage to someone who meant so much to so many.
She did not have enemies at all whatsoever. She just got along with everybody, and everybody loved her.
And the violence involved in her death only made it harder to accept. Those closest to Barbara viewed her as the person you'd want at your side in a fight. Was Barbara the kind of person who could stick up for herself?
Oh yeah. She was very tough, very strong, and she could kick butt. Nobody really messed with her.
She didn't go out looking for a fight, but if somebody was getting out of line in a bad way, she would have no problem standing up. She didn't take no stuff. She was a tough, strong girl.
Still, all of that energy and swagger had not been enough to save Barbara from a vicious killer. But it had helped police better understand the evidence they found at the crime scene, including the teenager's mangled fingernails.
Barbara Blatnick was a very physically strong girl. She would fight if she had been attacked.
Police were confident whoever attacked Barbara had likely been injured as well. And even though she had been found in the woods 30 miles away, police believe the search for her killer should start. Barbara Blatnick's murder made headlines across the state of Ohio.
It was a very big story, a very big deal. It was in the newspapers, it was on the news nightly.
And the media coverage led to a critical tip from a man who had been driving in the area where Barbara's body was discovered.
He stated that around 7:30 Sunday morning, he had been driving to work in front of Blossom Music Center when a maroon vehicle came flying out of the main entrance and cut across in front of him.
The tipster said he was taken aback by the car. There was no reason for anyone to be on that road during the winter months, especially at that time of the morning.
He said it was almost like it turned on two wheels as it cut in front of him.
The time of the incident, early on Sunday morning, lined up with the coroner's estimate of when Barbara's body had been left in that location. It led investigators to a chilling theory. Is it your belief that that was the killer the witness had seen that morning?
It makes sense to me, yes.
While the lead seemed promising, it was also problematic. There were thousands of cars in the area that fit that description. How difficult was it to find someone who potentially owned a maroon car in the area?
It would have been very difficult to track down.
Detectives decided not to make the information about the maroon car public. They believed that the sighting might be more valuable to use as a surprise against a potential suspect. Investigators focused their attention on retracing Barbara's final hours alive. The teenager left home around dinner time on Saturday night.
She was getting ready to leave. I gave her a kiss, and she walked out the door, and I never saw her again.
And where did she say she was headed off to?
There were several Christmas parties that her friends were having.
17-year-old and her friends continued to enjoy their Saturday night.
Garfield Heights at that time had several bars that weren't very stringent as far as letting underage people in. She visited one of those.
Friends said everyone in the group had been drinking. Barbara called her parents to check in around 10:30 that night.
She had called her father stating that she would be home shortly. They weren't all that concerned. When she didn't come home, they just figured that she had spent the night at a friend's house.
It was the last time Barbara spoke with anyone in her family. Police asked the teenager's friends for more details. What did Barbara's friends tell police about that night?
While they were in a bar, one of Barb's friends came up to her and overheard Barb talking about how nice her boyfriend Jerry was. And this friend told Barb that he had made some rude comments about her behind her back.
The friend shared the upsetting remarks Jerry had made about Barbara, and her mood suddenly changed.
She was visually upset, was mad that he was saying some nasty things along the line that she was only good for a lay and he didn't really want to be in a relationship with her.
As Barbara replayed those words in her mind over the next few hours, her anger slowly built into a simmering rage. Her best friend Chris, who wasn't there that night, said there's little doubt about what would have happened next.
She would have wanted to ask him what that was all about. She would ask directly to your face, what did you say? I want to hear it from your mouth.
Several of Barbara's friends said that she wanted to confront Jerry, and around 2:30 in the morning, she asked for a ride to her boyfriend's house.
She was very headstrong. She was a girl on a mission. It would take an awful lot to try to talk her out of it.
Barbara's friends never even tried.
Barbara's friends told police that they dropped her off here at the intersection of Warner Road and Grand Division, and they last saw her walking down the street towards her boyfriend's house.
How far was her boyfriend's home from where she was dropped off?
3 houses down from that intersection.
Before police questioned Jerry Stead, they did a deep dive into his background. What did detectives learn about Jerry Stead?
That he was older than Barb by 6 years. That he was a conduct.
Barbara's friends didn't approve of her dating the 23-year-old.
Those that did know Jerry did not like him. Somebody described him as cocky and a drug user, someone who was just using Barb.
And the ugly picture of Jerry got even worse when police checked the state's DMV database. What kind of car did Jerry drive?
Jerry had a maroon GM like the one described by the man passing Blossom Music Center.
What did detectives make of the fact that Jerry Stead had a maroon car?
Well, they felt that he could have been the person flying out of Blossom Music Center.
In fact, everything police discovered had moved Jerry to the top of their suspect list. Did police believe it was possible that she had gone to his house and confronted him and it deteriorated from there?
Yeah, that was their initial working theories about what could have taken place.
Barbara's loved ones agreed. When this happened, did anyone in your family believe that he was capable of murder?
Everybody thought he did it. Everybody did.
Barbara Blatnick's boyfriend, Jerry Stead, was now the prime suspect in her murder. Barbara was dropped off just steps from Jerry's home, and his car was a match to the one seen racing away from the area where her body was discovered. Did Jerry admit to seeing Barbara that night?
No, he said he did not see her that night at all. Did not speak to her.
But Jerry's description of his relationship with Barbara raised plenty of red flags.
He did not deny making the comments that he had made about her.
How did the police react when they heard Jerry describing some of the things he had said about Barbara?
It didn't seem like a normal, healthy relationship and could easily get into a situation where somebody gets hurt.
His words weren't enough to connect him to Barbara's murder. They still needed evidence to arrest him. Investigators focused on locking down his timeline.
Jerry stated that he had been out with a friend driving around the Cleveland area looking at Christmas lights.
Could his friend confirm that story?
His friend did confirm that, but his friend stated they were getting high and drinking, not looking at Christmas lights.
Jerry and his friend both said he was home by 11:30 that night.
Jerry's parents and brother confirmed that they were all in bed shortly after midnight.
Did the police believe Jerry's parents when they said he was at home at midnight?
No, they might be covering for him.
Police knew it was also possible that Jerry could have simply slipped out of the house at 2:30 that morning without his parents knowing it. Investigators looked for proof that Jerry was lying.
They examined Jerry for any wounds, scratches, cuts, and he didn't have anything to indicate that he had been involved in any sort of struggle or fight.
Barbara's broken fingernails indicated that her killer would have been injured during the vicious attack. Still, they turned their attention to their prime suspect's maroon car. When they processed Jerry Stead's car, what did they find out?
They did not find anything to indicate that it had been used that day to dump Barb at the scene.
The case against Barbara's boyfriend had suddenly stalled. Could police ever find any evidence connecting Jerry to Barbara's murder?
No, there was no evidence that connected Jerry to the murder.
But the 23-year-old remained under suspicion.
Jerry could not be cleared. They could not rule him out.
Detectives had to move on, and interviews with Barbara's friends pointed the investigation in a new direction.
There was a man at one of the parties that Barb had attended. This man and Barb had an altercation.
What did he and Barbara fight about?
A necklace. Barb had slapped him at some point.
Police questioned the young man,
But he said that Barb and her friends left before he did, and he never saw her again.
but the investigation uncovered a witness account that raised critical questions about that statement. The witness said that the young man had come to his house later that night, covered in mud, asking if he could use the washing machine. That had to be highly suspicious.
It was. It raised the possibility that maybe he had been in a struggle with Barb.
Still, the young man had no telltale scratches on his body and provided police with an explanation for his muddy clothes.
The man stated he slipped and fell off his porch into the muddy front yard.
Was he ever officially cleared?
No, the case was still wide open.
And that young man was just one of many names on their list. They interviewed more than 100 potential suspects. How daunting is it in an investigation where a net has been cast that wide?
It's very daunting. The list of potential suspects kept growing, and there were very few that they could rule out.
As the weeks and months passed, police were no closer to solving Barbara's murder than they had been on day one. Their investigation ground to a halt. How frustrating is it for investigators when a case goes cold?
When your evidence only takes you so far, it's extremely frustrating.
And the lack of progress forced Barbara's family to live in fear.
I had no idea who could have done it to her. And that's what the scariest part is. You know, you're standing in a convenience store and there's a man next to you. Is that the one that killed my sister?
But even that wasn't as traumatizing as watching her mother slowly die from a broken heart.
She was broke inside. It just broke her soul.
Then, in 2003, Detective Randy Tulumak reopened the investigation. What inspired you to get involved in this case?
They thought that we, as a police department, had forgotten about Barb.
Detective Tulumak and what he ultimately discovered would be an answer to their prayers. Detective Randy Tulumak promised Barbara Blatnick's family that he wouldn't rest until he solved the case. But it quickly became clear that even the first steps would be challenging. What happened when you tried to track down that physical evidence?
We were able to locate in storage boxes all of the evidence except for the biological biological samples that had been collected at Barb's autopsy.
How devastating was that?
It was very disappointing. I thought that's going to be the key to this case, to get those items examined for DNA, and we couldn't find it.
Instead of giving up, Detective Tulumak dug in. He would have to solve the case with old-fashioned police work. He started his investigation by talking with Barbara's boyfriend, Jerry.
The first logical place to start again was with Jerry Stead. Most of the facts pointed at him as the number one suspect.
Before the meeting, Detective Tulumak came up with a plan, a bluff about how much evidence police had against Jerry. He hoped that Barbara's killer would fear his DNA had been found at the crime scene. Was there a cat and mouse game that you played to make him believe that you actually had DNA evidence in the case?
I tried to be cagey about asking for his DNA. I said, we have evidence that could prove or disprove your guilt or innocence. Would you be willing to give me DNA sample for comparison purposes?
But Jerry's reaction was not what he expected.
I was a little bit shocked when he said, sure, I'll give you my DNA.
Detective Tulumak used the same strategy with several other original suspects. All of them willingly provided samples. That meant his plan led nowhere. Where did the case go from there?
The case eventually became cold again.
May have rolled by, but Barbara Blatnick was never far from the detective's thoughts.
I'm a bit OCD. Can't give things up until I get to the conclusion.
Then, in 2011, an odd twist of fate changed the course of the investigation.
Our property manager asked me to come down to the property room. Some items were being relocated, and could I help her with some of the heavier boxes?
After the boxes were moved, something caught his attention.
In the very back of the room, there was an old refrigerator.
Out of curiosity, he looked inside.
It was empty inside, except for in one of the crisper drawers, there was a brown paper bag with the name Blatnick written across it.
It was a stunning discovery. The bag contained the missing physical evidence from Barbara's case. What crossed your mind?
What actually crossed my mind was, holy, this is what we've been looking for all these years.
Perhaps the most important evidence were scrapings from under Barbara's fingernails.
I felt certain that we would have the perpetrator's DNA underneath her fingernails.
Detective Tulumak raced the evidence to the crime lab. And his hunch was correct. An unknown male DNA profile was identified. He was certain the name of Barbara's killer would finally be revealed when he uploaded it into CODIS, the FBI's national database.
Unfortunately, there failed to be a match with any known profile in that system. It was very disappointing.
The crime lab also compared the DNA to all of the original suspects, including Barbara's boyfriend, Jerry. Shockingly, the results were the same. There weren't any matches. But Detective Tulumak wasn't about to quit.
I was seeing news stories where genealogy had been utilized to solve cold cases.
But the process was expensive, and the department's resources were limited. Porchlight Project approached investigators. What is the Porchlight Project?
We are a nonprofit that raises money for genetic genealogy for Ohio cold cases.
James told Barbara's family that her case was the Foundation's top priority.
He said that Barbie's case was the first case he wanted to solve. It made me cry, and I had to hope again.
The Foundation paid for the evidence to be analyzed by an independent lab. And it narrowed down the suspect list to 4 men from one family. What did the lab say was the last name of Barbara's killer?
A member of the Zastonic family.
Was that name anywhere in the case file?
No, it was not.
Surreptitious DNA collection whittled down the list to a single brother, James Zastonic. What did you end up learning about James Zastonic?
At the time of the murder, he would have been 34 years old, living literally around the corner from where Barb had been dropped off that night.
Police picked up James and brought him in for questioning. What did he say when he was confronted with the DNA evidence?
He had no explanation as to why his DNA would be found on her body.
I know nothing about this, gentleman. I'm trying to tell you.
Well, I mean, the investigation tells us something.
I understand that. But my only thing is, maybe we might have hooked up or, an evening or something.
But the evidence indicated that Barbara had been brutally sexually assaulted. And the DNA under her broken fingernails had been the result of her desperately fighting for her life. James Zastonic was arrested and charged with Barbara Blatnick's murder. Detective Tulumak called Barbara's sister Donna to share the moment of triumph.
The joy in Randy's voice, it was just amazing. It was just like he was so fired up. And so I got fired up. It was just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
The promise of James Renner's Porchlight Project had
in my life.
It was unbelievable. Just, wow, really? This guy, right in our own backyard, is the one who did this?
But just when it appeared that Barbara's killer was finally locked up for good, James Zastonic was released on bail.
We were in the middle of a pandemic that we hadn't seen in 100 years. The prosecutor thought it would be best putting him under house arrest. He had an ankle monitor.
How did you feel about that?
I was angry. We were all angry. My sister's in the ground dead, and he's living in a cushy house. It's like another slap in the face all over again.
And just 2 months before the trial was set to begin, he died from cancer. What was your reaction to his death?
I was disappointed that we didn't have the chance to have the trial and have him found guilty, but I'd like to call it divine justice.
Are you bitter that he was able to live with his family and never held accountable for the murder?
Bitter's a soft word, but yes, very angry, very mad. He got to live his life like nothing ever happened, and he destroyed so many lives. He didn't have to suffer. We all suffered and still are suffering.
James Zastonic's death also left so many unanswered questions. What do you think happened to Barbara Blatnick that night?
Where he was living at that time, one of Barb's close girlfriends lived directly across the street. And I think that he wanted something from Barb, and she ended up dying for it.
final chapter of the Blatnick's journey was written, her mother had already passed away. But her friends and sister carry Barbara's memory with them every day.
Her smile, that personality, the way she lit up that room when she would walk in. She was just a very nice person. I considered her one of my best friends. I felt like I was her big brother. You can't take that away, you know, and I have that to hang on to for the rest of my life.
How do you honor Barbara today?
I find comfort that my mom and her and my aunts and uncles and everybody are together. I know that she's with people that love her. And I just talk to her every day. I still miss her every day.
The Porchlight Project continues to work with police to solve cold cases in Ohio. Their goal is to provide the resources that lead to answers for more families like the Blatnicks. I'm Paula Zahn. Please join us next time when we're back on the case.